Pauline Buckle says, hello, TCRS. I'm not sure if you're saying that because you see me. My phone tells me you're live, but often what I notice is I'll be saying a few things and then YouTube only sort of kicks in late. So maybe it's sometimes good to give it a couple of seconds. Terry Dean, good to see you. Terry says, I'm going to need to get Instagram one day. Great to catch you live and hope you're all fantastic today. Robbie Robin, you've been here for a while, I think. Get another member from Sweden. Good to have you here. Sunflowers is here as well. And a couple of others also watching. So just a heads up, the premise, the point of this particular live stream is to assess and to some extent analyze the ARGUIDO status, the sort of suspect status, the formal suspect status of Christian Bruckner. It's not to really have other conversations about someone else's guilt. So I want to be quite clear about that. What we here to talk about and to think about is the likelihood of Christian Bruckner's involvement in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. And that's really the box within which we are having this discussion. I've also put up a poll which basically kind of gives what's the word? Kind of manifests the gist of this particular live stream. The question is, do you think the Portuguese cops making Bruckner a formal suspect significantly changes this case? And so far, over 50 of you have voted. 36% say no, and 47% say, I don't know. So if you add those two together, you have around about 84, 85%. So by far the majority are kind of saying, either I don't know what this means or I'm not convinced that it means anything. Only 16%, now 15%, are saying that Christian Bruckner's ARGUIDO status is going to significantly change this case. It's a significant development. It's quite a low number, and in a way I'm quite disappointed that the number is so low, because I feel like I might be preaching to the converted. I don't really want to, what I want to do is change some of the hearts and minds, see if I can do that with some information that is a matter of public record and as factual as I can possibly make it. And does that then change, does that make you more informed about this case? And as a result of being more informed about the case, does that change the way you see it? And so that's what I'm kind of interested in. So we'll see whether those numbers change. Oh, I see it's gone up to 18%. So we'll see whether those numbers change. Who knows, maybe by the end of my live stream, I'll have convinced more people that my particular argument is very weak. Who knows? We'll see. So Sarah Moon asks the obvious question, who is Bruckner? So Christian Bruckner is a German dude who is currently imprisoned for separate crimes, and he has just been officially made a suspect in the Madeleine McCann case, like a formal suspect. The important thing is he's actually been made a suspect by the Portuguese, right? And they've also questioned him. And so we are literally something like 10 days before the 15-year anniversary of the Madeleine McCann's disappearance. And we're going to see why that matters as well, why this, the timing of this is actually not an accident. It's not a coincidence. Sarah says, thank you. It's a pleasure, Sarah. Amy Hall says, I can't wait to hear more. Fig Newton says, hi from Dallas, Texas. Graham Stanifith, good to see you here as well. Okay, so the yeses are now up to almost 20%. So now I've got a couple of people possibly to work with. So I'm going to take you through a script that I've already prepared. I hope that some of you know already and appreciate that I've written a couple of books on the Madeleine McCann case, a trilogy and 2 books of a second trilogy. I didn't quite finish the third book. That's sort of a work in progress. And then I've also prior to Luge, I went to the crime scene in person in May 2019, 3 years ago. Check Engine says, my votes are almost always wrong. Serendipity says, greetings from the East Coast of the USA. Serendipity, your name, your avatar name makes me think of a place that I almost went to stay at on the Wild Coast, also called Serendipity. Robbie Robbins says, great books, thanks for that. Okay, so I'm going to go to the script, and so I don't want to spend too long kind of pontificating. Let's get down to brass tacks. So the reason why I'm actually doing this is because a few of you reached out to me to comment on the latest news on the Madeleine McCann case. Well, not only have the Portuguese cops named Bruckner a formal suspect in Portugal, they've actually gone to the other side of Europe. The Portuguese cops have traveled to Germany and formally confronted Bruckner. They've informed him directly of his suspect status. They've also quizzed him, asking him, for example, where he was on the night Madeleine disappeared. In effect, they're trying to assess whether or not he has an alibi. Now, by the way, you'd think this would have been done 15 years ago, because it's not as though Christian Bruckner was suddenly discovered like 13 years later. Christian Bruckner's kind of been in the news for the past 2 years, but it's not as though the authorities didn't know about his existence way back in 2007. But it sure feels like that. It sure feels like they've suddenly realized that he was in Praia de Luge at that particular time, right? It feels like that, doesn't it? And so don't you think it's quite strange that now, 15 years later, you go and you ask the guy, oh, can you tell me where were you on the night Madeleine disappeared? You kind of think, maybe that's something you could have asked 15 years ago. And I think that's kind of also a good question. Didn't they ask him this 15 years ago? Wasn't he cleared, certainly in the minds and the eyes of the Portuguese cops, and specifically the lead detective, Amaral? You know, the cops at the time in 2007, weren't they satisfied that this guy wasn't the guy? You know, that's just another question. I think it's a bit naive to think that 15 years later, he's being asked for the first time, where were you on the night Madeleine disappeared? But this is a crazy case, who knows? But the other thing I think to emphasize is, couldn't they also have asked him this question the moment Bruckner started becoming a fixture as a prime suspect? Bear in mind, it was somewhere around 2020, that's more than 2 years ago, that Bruckner first started coming into the news as the sort of prime suspect material. And so when that first started, why would the Portuguese cops not travel to speak to him like then? In other words, the moment this was happening, in other words, why would you wait 2 years to ask this question? Why not ask it soon? And we're going to find the answer to that question in this live stream. Let's just see if there are any of you who already do know the answer to that question. So are there any, let me just ask, do you guys know why he's been asked this question now? Do you know why they've traveled now to Germany. Do any of you have an opinion on that, or have any of you read anything about that? Susan says, glad you are back safe and sound with all the storms on the south coast. Yeah, for sure. Terry Dean says they figured it didn't matter because he was already locked up. Interesting answer. Not quite what I'm looking for. Debbie Sim says time limit. That is a better answer, but I'm looking for the technical term. Get from Sweden says it has been almost 15 years since, yeah. Debbie McClellan says, here's my take on this. The McCann's have, okay, I don't really want to talk about that side of it. Robbie Robbins says, because they have to speak to him in person for legal reasons before the 15th anniversary, yes. Something else I'm actually looking for. Terry Dean says 15-year time frame almost up. That is close to, that's the closest answer so far. And Warji, you got it there, well done. Good evening, Sky, good to see you here. Sunflower says, is there new evidence? That's quite a good question. Is there new evidence? Do you think there is new evidence? So our yeses are now up to 22% and over 100 votes. So it's certainly going up. Ando Wajir says, haha, it took me forever to think of that. Well, I'm glad that you did. So what do I think of this? Like, what is my opinion of these gyrations in this case, you know, at this point, kind of what is going on? So as many of you know, as I say, I've traveled to Praia da Luz. I put a couple of links right at the top of chat of Instagrams that I took when I was in Praia da Luz in May 2019. I've mentioned a little bit earlier that I've written several books on the McCann case. So I have obviously ruminated on this case. I've analyzed it. I've studied it. I've gone through the discovery, also known as the PJ files. I've studied maps. I've studied cell phone data. I've measured distances. I've done quite a lot of things. I've done a sort of a personal study of the light at certain times of day, and so on and so on and so on. I've gotten practical. When I traveled to Praia da Luz, I personally experienced the shutters, and I almost broke the shutters in the place I was staying at because I wasn't quite, nobody said this is how they work. So I was actually trying to manually force them up and manually bring them down. And as far as I remember, I could be wrong on this, but as far as I know, Jerry did actually break the shutters in their room. But I could be wrong. That's just how I seem to remember that particular aspect. I think the first point to stress, so again, what do I think of this specifically in terms of Bruckner? So first, I think the first point to stress is that Bruckner hasn't been charged with anything. So he's been named a formal suspect, but he hasn't been charged, right? It's not quite like, it's almost like in America calling someone a person of interest. It's kind of that level. You get person of interest, and then you get, a suspect who then tends to get charged, right? So he hasn't been charged with anything in terms of the Madeleine McCann case. He has been officially declared a suspect, but it seems part of the protocol. Remember, this is not America. It's not the UK. This is a different country, and the laws there work slightly differently. One of the main things with the law in Portugal is you may not talk at all about an investigation while it's underway. They've got secrecy laws there. Now, you may not as a suspect, but you can almost have other people talking on your behalf, like PR spokespeople or whatever. And I suppose you could also argue that you may not speak to the media, but is there a law against blogging about what you were doing? Is there a law against anyway, that's something separate. So it seems part of the protocol that when you declare someone a suspect, in Portugal, you've actually got to tell your suspect this. You don't just kind of put out a press release. You don't just sort of call up the media or put a notice on the front of the police station. You've actually got to travel to the suspect wherever they are, and you've got to inform them in person. And then while you're at it, ask a few questions. That's kind of the protocol. And the arguido is under no obligation to answer. So in other words, you go there, you say, we are making you a suspect in this case, and we've got a couple of questions for you. And you can kind of imagine if you're being told you're a suspect, your answers to certain questions might get you off the hook there and then. You might say, but that's impossible. I was at a movie, and here's the ticket, and there's the time, and I went with this person, case closed, kind of thing. On the other hand, you might sort of make use of your right to remain silent. Now, in order to understand the arguido scenario, the process, I'm going to take you through three other arguidos essentially three other arguidos that were named in this particular case. And that's going to give you a sense of what we're talking about with Christian Bruckner. And then we're going to deal with Christian Bruckner directly as someone who is now the focus. We're going to deal with that kind of directly. So the first way we're going to deal with it is we're going to kind of come at it from the side, right? Nisi, good to see you here. J4MM, good to see you here as well. So when Madeleine McCann's mother, Kate McCann, sometimes also referred to as Kate Healy, in the discovery was questioned. I've seen some reports saying she was questioned for 11 hours. Some also say 4 hours, but the point is she was questioned on September 7th. That was essentially May, June, July, August, just over 4 months after the incident. She was questioned. I'm not saying she never spoke to the authorities, but on this occasion, she was questioned and made an arguido. She was questioned as part of the process of being officially named an arguido. And some of those photos taken where she goes to the Polizia Judiciaria in Portimao are part of the fabric of this case, where you just see all the people looking in on that, and then not. There was also Jerry doing the same thing, also being questioned, going through the same process. She was questioned from about 11 a.m., if my information is correct, at a police station in Portimao by Paula Ferreira, Raul Carlos, and Ricardo Paiva, at least those three investigators. And at the time, she refused to answer any of the 48 questions that she was asked. Now, Kathy, be good to see you as well. What I might do in a subsequent episode, maybe on the actual day, is go through those 48 questions that they asked her, because what is interesting with the 48 questions is it reveals what the investigators were thinking. It also reveals to some extent what they know or what they thought they knew. And then also reveals where they're sort of coming from. So in a way, the questions are kind of the investigators playing their hand. And regardless of them not being answered, the number of the questions and what the questions are directed at are definitely interesting. Another interesting kind of experiment to do is to almost in your imagination, imagine a different Kate McCann who answers these questions. And also you could almost say in hindsight, if she did answer them, what might some of these answers have been? I know that's very speculative, but it's certainly perhaps an interesting true crime, I don't know if you want to say strategy or experiment or whatever, hypothesis. Anyway, on that day that she was asked these 48 questions, she refused to answer any of them. She was also made an arguido. Now, as we know, so now 15 years later, what do we know? Nothing really came out of that. Kate was never formally charged, but this is where it gets quite interesting. So you might say, someone's being made an arguido. In Kate's case, she was asked questions, she didn't answer them, and then nothing really seemed to happen. So does it mean nothing? Does it actually mean nothing to be made an arguido in Portugal? And you can't really give a absolute answer to that because it depends on your arguido. And so we're going to look at two arguidos where the answers are different. So in Kate McCann's case, interestingly, in a court case that followed many years later, the claim was made that the McCann's had been formally cleared, right? So this sort of came out in the court narrative that the McCann's had been formally cleared, only for the Portuguese to actually sort of say, hold it. No. I don't want to put words in their mouths, so I would rather just read what was said at the time. So this was really the unfolding of events. In July 2008, the Portuguese dropped the investigation due to lack of evidence, and many interpreted this as clearing the McCann's. As such, on July 21st, the UK's Guardian newspaper published the following headline. I'll put a link to this in chat in a moment. But the headline read, McCann's and Murat. So Murat was another arguido, formally cleared in case of missing Madeleine, right? That was the headline. And let me just put this in chat. So if you guys want to look at it. Well, we had 23% from 135 votes. That's it seems to be getting higher and higher and higher, which maybe means I'm doing a worse and worse job. So let me continue. So almost a year after being formally made a suspect, this article appeared in The Guardian in the UK saying that the McCann's, that's Kate and Jerry, have been formally cleared, and then also another dude called Robert Murat, and we're going to talk about him in a second. And it was just sort of said in the media, kind of unambiguously, they've been cleared, right? So just to be clear, until this date, 3 people had been made arguidos, right? And Robert Murat was not really, the McCann's were related to one another and to Madeleine. Robert Murat was kind of a resident of Praia da Luz. I've walked to his home. It's sort of maybe 1 or 2 minutes walk from apartment 5A. It's just down the road. It's really just around the corner. Murat was in fact the first arguido in the Madeleine McCann saga, and this occurred just 12 days after Madeleine disappeared, less than 2 weeks after May 3rd. So what I want you to think about in your minds is the way Robert Murat's arguido story goes, and then the way Kate McCann's arguido story goes, and then kind of ask yourself, where does Christian Bruckner fit in? In other words, is Christian Bruckner's arguido status going to go a kind of a Robert Murat way? Is it going to go a Kate McCann way, or is it going to go a different way to both of them? Just something to think about. And so we're now going to examine these two arguido journeys, the journeys of two suspects, and how that was sort of resolved in kind of different ways. So I think this is quoting actually from Wikipedia. It's talking about the circumstances around Robert Murat. It says here, quote, he was named a suspect after a Sunday Mirror journalist told Portuguese police he had been asking about the case. So it's almost like curiosity killed the cat. If you think about it, you actually have a person who becomes a suspect because the media are starting to chatter amongst themselves. Do you think that's a good way for someone to become a suspect? And now apply that also to Christian Bruckner. Christian Bruckner has also become a suspect after the media's been chattering about him for a long time, right? So anyway, the point is Robert Murat was named a suspect after a Sunday Mirror journalist told Portuguese police that Murat had been asking about the case. So it's almost like, wow, that's his crime. He was curious. And then the Polícia Judiciária, or the PJ, that's the Portuguese police, they briefly signed Murat up as an official interpreter. So the police actually employed Murat as an interpreter. So he was a guy who could speak Portuguese and English. And I believe he was born in England. I think he came from Hammersmith or somewhere there. And he said he wanted to help because he had a daughter in England around Madeleine's age. But this guy was actually named a suspect after a journalist went and whispered into the ear of the Portuguese police. And he remained a suspect for quite a long time. But then Murat was, I'm not sure if this is accurate to say he was officially cleared as early as September of the same year. There was talk of him no longer being in the crosshairs of the Polícia Judiciária as early as September. But I think the point to make is, although there was the sense that he's not the main suspect anymore, the interesting thing is that was happening at the same time the McCann's became formal suspects. Just bear in mind, can you have a formal suspect of something and then someone else comes along that's potentially a better candidate? Does this person remain a suspect? Or do you just say, well, everyone's now a suspect kind of thing? You're going to stay a suspect even though we found someone else that we've now made a suspect. So if we just go through what happened, at about the same time the McCann's became formal suspects, Murat's ARGUIDO status was unofficially lifted. I think it's the best way of putting it. You might say unofficially. What do you mean by that? How can it be unofficially lifted? Well, according to the Irish Times, this is dated September 22nd, 2007. At this point, the McCann's were back in England and were regarded by the Portuguese as suspects in Madeleine's disappearance at that time. And so according to the Irish Times, quote, today the Portuguese weekly newspaper Sol, so it's an Irish newspaper quoting a Portuguese newspaper, Sol means sun, saying that Mr. Murat had now been told that the police have no case against him. So according to a Portuguese newspaper, they were saying that the Portuguese police have contacted Murat directly and said, don't worry, you're not a suspect anymore. But, and there was a but in this, but he is to remain an arguido until the investigation is complete. So it's like, even though we don't think you're a suspect, we're not going to tell everyone, right? And nevertheless, it sort of we're not going to officially say you're not a suspect, and yet it sort of comes out in the media regardless. And the Portuguese media at that. And so the reason the Portuguese police said we're not going to officially lift your status is we don't want to compromise other ongoing inquiries. So one of the issues with someone who's an arguido is that you've got to be quiet. You can't talk about the case. And so if they'd kind of said to him, okay, you're not an arguido anymore, he could potentially go to the media and give away a lot of insight and sort of information that the Polícia Judiciária may have felt they don't want the public to know, or they just want to protect the integrity of the investigation. On the other hand, you can kind of say, geez, is that fair to Robert Murat? He's actually not a suspect, but for the sake of the investigation, it's okay if everyone kind of still believes it. You know, it's almost like they're saying to him, you don't worry, you're not a suspect, don't feel bad, and, you know, don't worry about everyone else thinking you're a suspect. How would you feel about that? You probably feel, it's not really fair. So they do this to avoid compromising other ongoing inquiries. And so here's another article, Murat no longer Madeleine suspect, and this is from the Irish Times. I just want to put it in chat so you can see the source. And look at the date of that article, September 22nd, 2007. So he'd really only been a suspect for a couple of months before they were like effectively changing their minds, right? Then about a month later, article came out in the Manchester Evening News, Murat breaks silence. So I'm just going to put a link to this in chat. You don't have to read these articles. I'm just putting them there to show you that I've researched this and my sources for this. So Murat was only officially cleared. So anyway, he spoke to Manchester Evening News to basically say that he was pleading with the authorities, can you please clear me, right? And so, I don't know, you could almost say that, was he allowed to go to the media if he was unofficially a suspect, but officially still a suspect? Legally, quite an interesting question there. Anyway, so regardless of all of this, he was only officially cleared on July 22nd the following year, and he promptly sued 4 newspaper groups for libel and won 600,000, that's more than £500,000 in libel damages for their article seemingly trying to connect Murat to Madeleine's disappearance. So that's the Arguido narrative as it related to the first suspect, Robert Murat. Basically, he was named a suspect early on, and he was also the first suspect to be formally cleared. So that's Murat's Arguido narrative. Now let's look at Kate McCann's. So 8.5, almost 9 years went by since September 2007, since Kate McCann had been made an Arguido. And the assumption was that since the investigation had been archived, Murat et al., meaning Murat and the McCanns, in July of the following year, basically all the former suspects were now no longer suspects. That was the assumption. But that narrative seemed to change as late as February 2017, when a Portuguese judge asserted that Madeleine's parents, and this is something I'm also going to provide a source to, had not been cleared as innocent. Interestingly, I struggled a little bit to find the source. I first found it in Irish media, but then I later found it in the Telegraph. But this was reported around February 9, 2017. And I'll put a link to this article also in the description. And the article reads, let me just see if I can bring it up again. Madeleine McCann's parents have not been ruled innocent, judge says. That's the name of the article, dated 9 February 2017. So I'll put a link to that up here. And I'll put another link to the Irish Times article, if I can find it. I'm not sure if I've got it here. Anyway, if you Google it, you might be able to find it. Anyway, so this is what is written in the Telegraph. Quote, the Supreme Court judges said that lifting their status, meaning the McCann status, as formal suspects does not mean they were innocent. So now you kind of have got to kind of wonder, this seems to be corroboration that their status as formal suspects was indeed lifted, doesn't it? Anyway, going back to the article, it says, quote, the court said it wasn't their job to determine whether the McCanns bore any criminal responsibility over their daughter's disappearance, and said, and I've put this in bold, it would be wrong for anyone to draw any inferences about the couple's guilt or innocence from their ruling, end quote. Now, but then the wording becomes more explicit about the impact of the shelving or archiving of the investigation from here on out in the article. According to the Telegraph, they said, quote, it should not be said, this is quite important, it should not be said that the appellants were cleared via the ruling announcing the archiving of the criminal case. In truth, that ruling was not made in virtue of Portugal's Public Prosecution Service having acquired the conviction that the appellants hadn't committed a crime. The archiving of the case was determined by the fact that the public prosecutors hadn't managed to obtain sufficient evidence of the practice of crimes by the appellants, end quote. I think I do have the link. Is this the Irish Times? Yeah. Okay. So it was the Irish Independent. So I'll put this link in the description. Okay, so let's continue. So it's still a little murky to figure out what's the official position versus the unofficial position. Are they officially not suspects, but officially something else? In any event, now we get to Christian Bruckner. As you can see, the ARGUIDO status can mean very little or absolutely nothing, as we saw in the Murad case, or it can potentially mean something. Of all the reporting I've seen thus far on Bruckner's ARGUIDO status, I quite like this article from Sky News, written by Martin Brunt, and I'm going to put a link to that in the chat. I actually saw Martin Brunt like in person when I went to Praia de Luz. I saw him on the night of May 3rd, funny enough. So on the night of May 3rd, at a particular time, not close to 9 o'clock in the evening, closer to 10 p.m., I did some measurements and I timed certain routes and I did some kind of observations. One of the things I also wanted to do is walk from A to B and see if just I could walk without bumping into somebody in the streets. That was something else I just wanted to, it was like a little bit of a rough experiment in that sense. And obviously this was 12 years later. And so I kind of went to the front of the apartment and he was actually not there. He was in the front of the apartment, but he was sort of on the side of Rua de Gentile Martins, that road. And then I sort of saw him a little bit later on, even lower down on the road. I don't know what he thought I was doing there, but I thought it was quite weird. And I could be wrong. Maybe the person that resembled him wasn't him, but it did look like him. But there was a part of me that was thinking, that isn't him. You think it's him, but it's not him. But then I think I did see him the next day reporting on on the premises, and then you actually saw him appearing on Sky News, you know. So it definitely was the same person. And I took photos of that and I also put that on Instagram. But I'll get back to that in a moment. The timing of Bruckner being made in ARGUIDO, I think, is interesting. So why has Bruckner been made in ARGUIDO now, right? And we kind of dealt with that earlier in this live stream. Martin Brunt seems to be of the opinion, and I have seen it in other articles, that Bruckner has been made a suspect simply to head off Portugal's important statute of limitations. Under those were the three words I was looking for earlier. Andar Warje nailed it, and that is really what it's all about. The statute of limitations expires for serious crimes about 10 days from now in terms of this particular case. Portuguese law, according to his article, rules out a prosecution for serious crimes after 15 years. Now, what I think is quite interesting with this is they don't actually say what the serious crime is. What is the serious crime? what serious crime are we talking about? In America, the statute of limitations for certain crimes never expires. In any event, effectively, it appears the Portuguese didn't make Bruckner and Arguido because they suddenly unilaterally found a reason to do so. This is quite important to emphasize. The Portuguese didn't kind of have a eureka moment and realize, wow, this makes sense, and put two and two together, and because of some kind of new evidence or whatever it was, realize, wow, we've got to go and speak to him, and then that's why they made him an Arguido. I think quite a few people have got that that perception, which is the wrong impression. They were likely prodded instead by the German authorities, basically, who want to, I think, possibly prosecute Bruckner for other things, and they don't want to be limited by the statute of limitations running out, right? So anyway, Brunt goes on in his article saying, quote, "The Arguido status is perhaps also an insurance policy for the Portuguese to pursue their own prosecution if the Germans decide eventually to rule out Bruckner." He doesn't say Bruckner in his article, but that's who he's referring to. He goes on to write, quote, "At the moment, the German authorities are effectively in charge of the investigation." So this idea that Bruckner has been identified by the Portuguese and the Portuguese are taking over is a fallacy. I actually seem to remember it being reported somewhere in the British media that the Portuguese are going to continue investigating. Like the Operation Grange, the whole British investigation is stopping. The budget's been sort of cancelled, but don't worry, the Portuguese are going to continue investigating. Well, not really. The German authorities are actually effectively in charge of the investigation, and Martin Brunt describes the Portuguese and Scotland Yard detectives as bit part players. They're kind of being asked to do certain things, told to do certain things, and so on. Brunt also says the Arguido status is often a prelude to an arrest, but he also says that's hardly likely in this case. And I tend to agree with him on this score. I don't think Bruckner is going to be ultimately charged for the crime of whatever they say happened to Madeleine McCann. And if he is charged, well, then will there be a trial? Well, I don't see that happening either, but it would be pretty interesting if there is a trial. I think we'd all like to see a trial, even if it goes that route. Anyway, Martin Brunt also writes that Bruckner's lawyer, and he doesn't refer to him as Bruckner, but it's Bruckner's lawyer, Friedrich Fulcher, played down this development, telling Sky News, "This shouldn't be exaggerated." And he said, "I assume it's to block the statute of limitations. It's not a charge and it can be revoked." And of course, it is being exaggerated. A big deal is made of the fact that Bruckner is now an official suspect in the Madeleine McCann case. Like, this is a big deal. And that is kind of what this live stream is about, is it such a big deal? Is it a big deal? Is it going to be a big deal? Is it going to significantly change anything that's happened? Of course, as I say, it is being exaggerated by the British press, and now's a great time to exaggerate it. It's approaching the 15-year anniversary. It's a big milestone, and there's the sense that we want to show that something is happening, that there is progress, that there are suspects, that things are happening. An arrest is imminent. It's going to happen at any moment. I don't know if those of you who've been following the Madeleine McCann case, how often you've heard those words, that an arrest is imminent. It's like, we're almost there. This guy's about to be arrested, and then it just doesn't happen. And then another guy's identified. We're just about to arrest this guy. It's amazing. It's going to happen within days. I mean, if you look at your watch now, it could be any second now, but then it doesn't happen. And so is this another example of that? Well, what do you think? And so there's an interesting article from BBC that was posted just a few hours before I wrote the script. Not sure if it'll give, I think according to what it says now, is it was about a day ago, so now it's not that recent. I'll put it there in the chat, a link to that. But a quote from the article reads, Madeleine McCann's parents have welcomed news that a German man has been formally made a suspect over the 3-year-old's disappearance. Now, if you know this case quite well, I think you could also say in the past, they haven't really had much to say about Christian Bruckner. I think they've said, I think the German authorities have said they don't believe Madeleine's still alive. And the McCanns have kind of said, well, we think she is still alive. And as far as I know, I could be wrong, I don't know if the McCanns have traveled to speak to Bruckner. I wonder whether they will travel to speak to him now. But anyway, they, according to the article, they've welcomed news that this German man has been formally made a suspect. The article goes on to say, Kate and Jerry said it reflected progress in the investigation. And so this is the perception that I'm kind of looking at, evaluating, and asking you guys to assess as well. Does this mean progress in the investigation? Kate and Jerry are saying this is reflecting progress in the investigation, right? And I mean, that is part of what the poll is asking. Is this going to significantly change, what is happening here? So I see we're now up to 203 votes. A quarter of you now believe that the Portuguese cops making Bruckner a suspect is changing the case. Well, just less than a quarter, 24% of you saying it is a significant development, which is quite a lot of you. So I wonder whether what I'm going to share with you now is going to change your opinion at all for those 24%. Of course, there's 75%, 3/4 of you that's saying, almost 43% are saying no. That's almost half of you are saying this doesn't really mean anything. And then about 1/3 of you are saying you don't know. We'll see how those numbers change. So I'm not sure, as I say, that I agree that declaring Bruckner a formal suspect after 2 years of inquiry is progress. That's the one way of looking at it. So I don't know if you can say 2 years go by, we've been talking about Bruckner, or Bruckner has been in the media for about 2 years. Declaring him a suspect at this point seems like very, very slow progress from one way of interpreting it. But you could also look at it another way and say, wow, actually, we're almost at 15 years passing, which is the true length of this investigation. Is that reflecting progress? Making a dude a suspect after 15 years, is that really progress? And is this declaring of someone a formal suspect, is it really going to go anywhere? Does it have any legs? Does it have any meat to it? Because it feels like the only reason they did this was to tick a box, to say, well, we don't want the statute of limitations to run out. Well, let's do that. We're doing it for kind of administrative purposes, unless I'm wrong, right? So I just want to thank Terry Dean. Terry Dean says, doesn't it have to first be proven that an abduction even took place before someone can be formally charged? It's a good question. It's a good question. If you're asking me if it's yes or no, you would think so, wouldn't you? Let me throw the question back at you. Do you think it has been proven that an abduction even took place? And I don't really want to go into this because it's not really what I want to talk about in this, but I think Detective Amaral believes that there may have been a simulated abduction. So it's quite a fine line between something that was an abduction and something that was meant to look like an abduction, whatever you want to make of that. So anyway, we go a little bit further. I think this is also from the BBC.com article. It says, Portuguese prosecutors made Christian Bruckner an arguido on Thursday, but did not formally reveal his name. Bruckner has not been charged and still denies any involvement in the case. And this is where there's some quite interesting reinforcement for this particular position. And it comes from someone who will be familiar to those who know this case, a former police officer by the name of Jim Gamble. And he's referred to in the BBC.com article, saying that he believes the case against Bruckner is strong and the confidence of the German police should not be underestimated. So he's really talking up this event. He's saying it is significant. And he also said the following, this is quoting from what he said, quoted by BBC.com. He said, quote, "This seems like a really strong case." In other words, he's saying Bruckner, the case against Bruckner, seems like a really strong case, and that's why I don't think it is a procedural tick in a box to make sure they don't miss out because of the statute of limitations. Oh, so it's not just a procedural tick of the box. Does it have nothing to do with the statute of limitations, or does it have something to do with it? So let me ask you guys, so this is kind of a sub-poll. Do you think Bruckner's arguido status now has got to do with the statute of limitations, yes or no? If you think it's yes, say yes, and if you think no, say no. Let's see what you guys think. Ruth Bashford says, if it was a strong enough case, Bruckner would have been charged. Robbie Robbins says yes. Jim Minchell, yes. Haley Lawyer says no. Okay. Debbie McClellan says yes. Sharon Drury says something about the Portuguese police were twiddling their thumbs for years and just woke up. She wants to know, was he questioned years ago? Jomo says yes. Terry Dean, yes. Sharon Drury, yes. Gid says, I think so. Morgan LaFay, no. So most of you say yes, that this has to do with the statute of limitations. If it doesn't have to do with the statute of limitations, you've kind of got to ask, has there been new evidence? Well, if there has been some new evidence, why has that not been reported, right? Ali, the question was, do you think Bruckner's arguido status now has got to do with ticking the box of the statute of limitations, or do you think it's not got to do with that? It's got to do with something else. So almost all of you are saying you think it has got to do with the statute of limitations. I think so too. That's what I think it's about. The child protection expert, that's how they refer to Jim Gamble in the article, claimed a phone attributed to Bruckner placed him in the area within a 30-minute window. He also said that Bruckner had burgled holiday homes in the area and had children's clothes in his camper van. So he's kind of saying, this is like your smoking gun against Bruckner. Now, I don't quite know what they mean by in the area within a 30-minute window. So what 30-minute window are you talking about, and what do you mean by in the area? Are you saying, I mean, we know he was in Praia de Luz, but none of the Topper 7 or any other witnesses thought they saw him. And the important point to stress here is that over the years, they've found many suspects and they've developed sketches to articulate, to describe, to capture the likeness of all of these suspects. And no one ever sketched Bruckner. Now, you might think, so what, maybe he just sneaked in and out and nobody saw him. But that's one of the big points I want to make in this presentation, in this discussion, is to say, when you go to Praia de Luz, when you stand either at the door of apartment 5A or at the window that is beside the door where the shutters are, or around the other side, we have the gate going up the steps. But if you just walk in that area, it feels like there's nowhere you can walk without being seen, because there are there's this sort of wedding cake of high-rises, apartments all over. They're on your right, your left, in front of you, and behind you. So, and bear in mind, this gives us sort of a helicopter view from almost every conceivable angle. So if you decided, okay, I want to take a child and I'm going to run through the streets, your chance of being seen by someone who's just sort of idling on their balcony is extremely strong, right? The chance that someone is going to be kind of just, smoking a cigarette on their balcony or having a beer or doing whatever is very high because their balcony is everywhere. That's the one point to make. The other point to make is your chance of bumping into someone is also very high. So is that really something you want to do there? If that is the thing you want to do, isn't there a better place to do it than in the middle of this sort of honeycomb of apartments? It's almost like if you're an ant and you want to steal a breadcrumb, do you go into the middle of another sort of ant hole, or what do you call it, ant mound, and you go into the middle of that and then try and steal your breadcrumb, or do you try and go around the periphery? Do you go where there are more ants, or do you go where there are less ants? Do you go where the honeycomb is the densest, or do you go where it's the thinnest? Just a simple question. But anyway, the point is that he was in Praia de Luz, Bruckner, and none of the Tupper 7 or any other witnesses thought they saw him. I just heard a very weird sound behind me. I don't know if it's the cat. Anyway, probably is the cat. So anyway, Jim Gamble sort of summarized his position as quoted by BBC.com. He said, quote, "I think the circumstantial evidence that I know exists is extremely strong. I wouldn't be surprised if charges follow." So he's got he's very confident that they found their man. This is going to solve this 15-year case. We're about to reach game over. This is the end game of the Madeleine McCann case. They have found their man, kind of thing. So Jim Gamble says, "I wouldn't be surprised if charges follow. I would be very surprised if charges follow." Or put it another way, I wouldn't be surprised if charges don't follow. Anyway, now I want to talk to you guys a little bit about my experience when I went to Praia de Luz. Praia de Luz, for those who don't know, is a little enclave. It's sort of a touristy holiday resort. Of course, when it's not that, it is a local area and local shops and whatnot, but it's mostly a travel mecca for, to a large extent, British tourists. What I think has kind of been missing from the Madeleine McCann narrative, and I don't think I even realized it until I went there myself, is that Praia de Luz is near the western tip of Portugal's sunny, beachy Algarve coast. But more specifically, Praia de Luz is close to the westernmost tip of Europe. Did you know that? So Praia de Luz is kind of like the last biggest resort town. So it's sort of the last biggest little settlement, a place that's got a supermarket and, quite a large volume of people staying over. But after that, you get the Cape St. Vincent Lighthouse, and that is the westernmost tip of Europe. Did you guys know that? So I just want to check whether you guys did know that. Did you know that Praia de Luz is close to the westernmost tip of Europe, not just of Portugal, but of the entire Europe? Praia de Luz, I will spell it for you, Sharon, is spelled like this. Praia is the Portuguese word for beach, So you see prior this and prior that. Prior deluge means beach of light. And I think that has got something to do with the church that is there, the Lady of the Light, something like that. Okay, so let me just continue. So, as I said, I was there at Praia da Luz 3 years ago in Portugal, right around the time of the anniversary. I think I left South Africa on the 30th or the 29th, I think it was the 29th of April, around about this time, and then flew overnight to arrive in Amsterdam on the 30th of April. And then I think I was in Praia da Luz like either the 1st of May or the 30th of April, somewhere like that. And then obviously just a few days later, it was on the anniversary. So I've traveled to be there on the anniversary. And so I was quite dismayed to find in the local press when I got there, when I got to Portugal, as I say, around the time of the anniversary, local newspapers were reporting on a German, I'll just say P word, you know what I'm referring to. You don't even need to say it in chat. I think you know what I'm talking about. And so this was a German P word, and this suspect's name was not Christian Bruckner, his name was Martin Ney. Does that name ring a bell? Let me just do a quick poll here. Any of you heard Martin Ney? Any of you heard the name Martin Ney before? It's N-E-Y, Martin Ney. Does that name ring a bell? Have you ever heard it or seen it in the media? Robbie Robbins says not before today. A couple of you say you have, but most of you seem to be saying no. Sharon Drury says yes. Mel Stiller says no, not me. Okay. So let me take you through this. So I've snapped some photos of articles that I found while I was in Portugal and posted them onto Instagram. I obviously can't show them to you here, but if you went through them, you would find articles referring to Martin Ney that I posted to Instagram from publications that I came across when I was in Portugal. And it talks about him said to resemble a photo fit issued by detectives investigating the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Ney, originally from Hamburg, targeted children on holiday by entering their tents or villas wearing a mask and armed with a weapon. This is from an article, German P named as Madeleine case suspect. It's written by Richard Ford. What else does he say? Gonzalo Amaral was, okay, blah, 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 blah. Scotland Yard refused to comment on the claims except to say that the investigation was ongoing. Clarence Mitchell, a spokesman for the McCann family, said it was plausible that police were looking again at Ney, right? You know, there's some other articles that I've took photos of. On May 6th, the Sun had this little kind of a block of news, picture of Madeleine, and it says, Maddie Efit Hope, and the article reads as follows. Kate McCann believes an Efit linking daughter Madeleine's abduction to a German serial killer could crack the case. In her 2011 book, Madeleine, she spoke of finding 4 people, okay, blah, 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 blah. And then it says, one of the photo fits resembles jailed P. Martin Ney, 48, who cops are probing over missing Madeleine. And then right, meaning that's Madeleine on to the right. So what they're doing is they're saying there's credible reason to be investigating this guy because someone described him. There's a photo fit of him, and this guy resembles the photo fit, right? Then there was also this tweet from a British ex-cop, Colin Sutton, decrying the Sun's, what he described as selective coverage of Martinez. All of this is what I noticed while I was in Portugal in May 2019. And so Colin Sutton said something about once more at the Sun, selectively quotes from a balanced piece of journalism. Mr. Amaral said that the German was being targeted as a scapegoat. Yet if you read their exclusive, he is presented as a viable suspect. And then he, asked why is that happening? So here you have Colin Sutton citing Mr. Amaral saying that this German who's being targeted is just a scapegoat. He's not a legitimate suspect according to Amaral, right? And on May 3rd, Mark Suanokonoko, anyway, who I'm talking about, that Australian writer in Australia, Mark, who did the Maddie series. On May 3rd, 2019, he tweeted, 2 weeks ago, Gonzalo Amaral told me Operation Grange was targeting a German P word as the man who took and possibly killed Madeleine. He said that man, a known offender of, what, would be a scapegoat. And then he has a link to that article from 9news.com.au. So this is where it gets quite interesting. The media coverage around the time I was in Praia de Luz, around the time of the anniversary, was dealing with a totally different German P word. And this guy was actually, you could argue, was more closely linked to the fabric of this case because there was even a suspect who described him, right? So he was linked via photo fit that he kind of resembled. And so Tracy Candola, a well-known shill, someone who often promotes the pro-McCann pieces, you might call it apologia, you might just call it pro-McCann, you might call it a defender of the McCanns or a supporter of the McCanns, whatever you want to call it. She seemed to kick off the whole Martinez narrative with this article in the Daily Mail dated May 4, 2019. Let me put a link to that in chat so you can see what I'm talking about. Corporal Deb says, good day from Australia. Good to have you here. Sky says hello to Ivy. Ivy might be trapped behind my bedroom door. I'm not sure if she closed it by mistake, but I haven't heard anything since. Anyway, so this is a quote from Candola's article in the Daily Mail. She writes, quote, this is from May 4th, 2019. She wrote, quote, detectives in Portugal are closing in on a foreign P word of considerable significance following a tip from Scotland Yard. Now, bear in mind, my poll is asking you, how significant do you think this particular suspect is, right? Let's just see what you guys are saying at this point. Let's see where the poll stands. So yes has gone down to 23%. It was at 24%. 241 of you have voted. As many as 45% of you are saying that it's not significant, essentially. Around 33%, around a third of you are saying you don't know what it really means, which is also quite a large proportion. So this article kind of states kind of unambiguously, this guy, this is considerably significant. And this is as a result of a tip-off from Scotland Yard. And then she describes him as a prolific, I'm not going to repeat the word, anyway, Martinez 48 is believed to be one of two key persons of interest. Who do you think the other one was? And she says, again, bear in mind, this is May 2019. He's one of two key persons of interest officers are now focusing on and are set to quiz behind bars. Well, if they were set to quiz Bruckner, well, how long did that take from this point? 3 years, from 2019 until now. And then quite sort of weirdly, she says, Maddie's parents, Kate and Jerry, are yet to be informed of any fresh leads. So it's quite weird that you would say this, the detectives are closing in on someone of considerable significance. Oh, but by the way, we haven't actually told Kate and Jerry about this, or they have yet to be informed of any fresh leads. So you can kind of ask, do they know about this guy? Is this a fresh lead? What are we actually saying here, if you know what I'm getting at? Anyway, there's actually a photo of Martin Ney, and the photo fit next to it. And I must say it does resemble him in terms of the oval, the sort of shape of his face. Maybe I can put a link to that particular image. But I mean, yeah, so it's basically this image, copy image address. So do you think that that image resembles this image? Do you think that image resembles this image? Laurie Kovac says, I thought we heard 2 weeks ago that this case was being officially closed. Where did this all come from? Well, the investigation is being closed. I guess it's going to continue sort of in Germany now. It's not going to continue in the UK. It's not really continuing effectively in Portugal, but it's kind of going to continue in Germany in a way, if that makes sense. Victoria says it's a far-fetched resemblance for me. Okay. Okay, so the same article refers to Gonzalo Amaral, the former lead detective on the case, as disgraced, giving a recent interview to Australian journalist Mark Suanakonko. I'm not sure if she's actually spelt it right, but the one that I've just mentioned earlier, in which he claimed police were on the verge of naming a new Maddie suspect, a German P word whom he didn't identify. And then family spokesman, so she doesn't refer to the scapegoat aspect, right? Family spokesman Clarence Mitchell said of the potential new kidnapper, the potential new suspect for that in terms of Ney, it might be him and he fits the profile. He's a known something, and he's a foreigner. Obviously, he uses the P word there. So he's kind of saying it could be him, he fits the profile, and so it's kind of suggested that this is either a significant lead or it could be. Now, although 2 German suspects were mentioned, only Ney was mentioned by name. So it's quite weird. Why not mention Brookner by name at this point? But only Ney is mentioned by name. And as we know, absolutely nothing came out of Ney. So we are now 3 years later, and you can say for all the imminent arrests, and this is a significant lead, and it's very plausible, and he fits the profile, what happened? Absolutely nothing. So naturally, in the days following, and I was in Portugal at the time, other media took the baton, and over 2019, the entire anniversary period, Ney became the sort of pedo of the moment in the Madeleine McCann case. So you had this article in The Independent, Madeleine McCann, German P word is new suspect in police investigation, reports say. That was The Independent, May 5th. From Yahoo News Australia on the 6th of May, the very next day, German P word emerges as new suspect in Maddie McCann case. Madeleine McCann detectives believe German child murderer and P word is latest suspect in the case after he matched photo fit of abductor. So you've got all this, all these news articles, and it's all so exciting, and it's all about to happen. But what did happen, right? And so the question is, aren't we going through the same wag the dog scenario all over again? And haven't we been through the same wag the dog scenario over and over and over again for many years over the anniversary? Isn't it just the same thing? What one can say, as I said earlier, is Martinet at least matched one of the many suspect photo fits in this case that kind of seemed to link him in a way to the fabric of this case, whereas Christian Bruckner never did. There's no one who sort of saw him and thought of him as a suspect. And so he was sketched and described and all that kind of thing. Martinet was perfect suspect material, except for one small little problem. He targeted small boys, not girls. And so I'm going to put up a link to this article from Mao. It's not my favorite source to mention. I really like the Telegraph and the Independent and so on. But anyway, what they say here, which is quite interesting, is, where is it now? So this is quoting from this article. Quote, in 2011, Ney was jailed for life after killing Stefan Jahr, 13 years old, in 1992, Dennis Rostel, 8 years old, in 1995, and Dennis Klein, 9, in 2001. Now look at these ages, 13, 8, and 9. Even the youngest age is almost 3 times older than Madeleine McCann's age. You could arguably say twice as old. Then it says, while all these known victims have been boys, experts say gender does not factor into a P-words consideration. Last year, it was reported that Ney had confessed to a 4th killing to an inmate. This time, it was Jonathan Coulomb, 10 years old, who was kidnapped and murdered during a holiday camp in Saint-Brévin-les... I really don't know how to say that. Is Bria-Lace not in? Saint-Brévin-les-Pins. Saint-Brévin-les-Pins in 2004. Anyway, this is the name, obviously somewhere in France. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. A fellow YouTube actually contacted me on Twitter today just to say she's been getting a lot of criticism for how she pronounces things. I've gotten that as well. I've also learned to not appreciate the criticism, but be humble about it, because in the Baldwin case, I definitely got Helena's name wrong for quite a long time. And getting irritated with criticism doesn't help you get it right. So on the other hand, some of us YouTubers do work quite hard. We are trying quite hard, and sometimes it feels like people think we can get nothing right. But nevertheless, it is important to get the details right. Nisi says, Nick, do you agree that gender can change with certain P killers? I don't agree in terms of Ney, right? So that's kind of what I've said here. According to the experts, gender is not a factor. I'm an expert, and I would say it is a factor. I'm just saying I'm an expert on the Madeleine McCann case, having written 5 books, having traveled there and having studied the whole thing. I would be a little bit more, how can I put it? I wouldn't be as absolute as what is said here, that gender does not factor. I would say sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So I think you can have certain crazed, disturbed individuals where it's not gender specific, but I think you definitely have gender specific P-word criminals. I definitely think you do. And I think Martin Ney was one of them, a gender specific criminal. In other words, what we're talking about is a child obsessed criminal, but it can also just be a criminal who's obsessed in a different way. who is either homosexual or heterosexual. And so a homosexual will tend to be gender specific, right? And in the same way, a heterosexual would tend to be gender specific. You could have exceptions to that, but generally I don't think you can say that it does not factor. I just don't agree with that. And I also think you've got to look at the crimes that this criminal has committed. If it's only been boys, because it says all his known victims have been boys, I don't think you can say, well, that doesn't mean he wouldn't blah, blah, blah. Yes, it does, because all his known victims have been boys. I don't think you can kind of go, that's not a factor. Of course it's a factor. So I disagree with that. Anyway, about 7 months later, 7 months after I was in Praia da Luz, 7 months after Martin Ney sort of burned through the media and everyone got very excited, the case is about to be solved, it's incredible. After all of this time, we found our man. About 7 months passed with nothing happening, of course. And at the end of November 2019, at the end of November that same year, Gonzalo Amaral started stirring the sediment in the media, saying that Martin Ney, he's not actually the P word of the moment. It's actually somebody else. And that was when the year cycled over from 2019 to 2020. And guess who then became the next P word of the moment? Well, Christian Bruckner. And he's been the P word of the moment for the last 2 years until now, right? And so what I'm trying to show you is we've just gone through this whole rigmarole with Martin Ney that never went anywhere. And now the question is Christian Bruckner going to be this breakthrough in the Madeleine McCann case? At the time that the case is being sort of closed, have they actually at last, even though the case has been closed, they've actually at last found the missing link? Is this it, right? So I'm going to provide a link to the story. New Maddie bombshell. Top Madeleine McCann cop reveals chief suspect is mystery P word in German prison, but not the notorious child killer Martin Ney. So typical. You have this flood of certainty that Martin Ney is our guy. And then, oh no, we've got another bombshell. It's not this guy, it's that guy. Oh, okay. Let's now fixate on that guy. And on and on and on. So let me just put a link to this article from the 30th of November from 2019. As I say, you don't really have to read these articles. I'm putting it here just to show you that I've done my research. What I'm telling you is anchored in the media narrative, that it's based on what's publicly available. It's not thumb sucking, and it's information that's out there. So anyway, according to this article in the Sun, it says that Amaral was the officer that was initially in charge of the investigation, and it was actually him that made the McCann's arguidos, or official suspects, before he was fired from the case. And then it refers to his interview with an Australian podcast. That's the guy, Mark, from Australia, who works for 9 News. And in his interview, he mentioned the possibility of a German P word being responsible, but he didn't mention the now 49-year-old Hamburg-born child strangler Ney by name. Instead, he described the suspect only as someone who had been ruled out of the investigation into the missing British youngster in 2008, but then later jailed in his home country. Do you want me to read that again? So according to this article, which is quoting kind of another source, quoting Amaral telling Mark from 9 News, saying, Amaral said, he didn't give the guy's name, he didn't say it's Christian Bruckner, but he said, this is someone who we ruled out of the investigation in 2008. Well, I guess you could say by 2008. but he's subsequently been jailed in his home country. Where is his home country? Was Germany. Now, Amaral, the original lead investigator in the case, has said the suspect isn't Ney. Ney was also German. So that's not the dude who's jailed, right? And he was jailed for life in 2012 for abduction and the murder of 3 children, and also for other crimes. And so Amaral was quoted saying, "What I know is that the suspect is not him, it's another man," meaning it's not Ney, it's somebody else. And he says he's also in prison in Germany. He's also a P word. And I think this is obviously a reference to Bruckner. Do you agree with that? And then the article goes on to say, quote, "In a bizarre twist, Amaral said that," I'm not sure if I'm going to read that because I'm not sure if I agree with that. I'm not going to read that part. If you want to read the part that starts with "in a bizarre twist," you're welcome. I'm just not going to do that. And then, so I'm not going to take that any further. Then I know when I was in Portugal in May 2019, I came across all the P-word news stories, including in Portuguese publications. And I couldn't help feeling extremely disappointed. So I'm coming to Praia da Luz and I'm kind of wondering, what do the locals think happened? What is the local media saying? What is the local sense of reality? And so I come there and it's just a P word all over the place. And I must say I felt really disappointed. I was like, because my position on the Madeleine McCann case is it's not a P word abduction thing. It's got nothing to do with P words, right? It's got nothing to do with that. And so to come there and just see it plastered all over the media, I felt really quite blue about it. It felt like the PR battle had been won a long time ago, including in Portugal, and thus the pedo narrative had actually taken over reality. And I was very sad to see that. So what is my take on current events? It's really the same as it's always been. Madeleine was never abducted. And as I say, can you imagine trying to move unseen through this warren of apartments that you can see anyone and everyone from miles away? Can you actually imagine someone trying to do this in the middle of all of the sort of wedding cake of apartments? You want to now try and do something and you're going to try not to be seen. And that is why there are so many efforts, because so many people were seen, because there were so many people all over the place that were potential witnesses. On the other side to say, you might say, well, the Ocean Club was like this beehive, this honeycomb structure. And, it's not to say you couldn't just slip out somewhere out of this honeycomb structure and disappear into the fabric of Praia da Luz. But the thing is, where apartment 5A is situated, it's not like at the bottom of the road, kind of where the tennis courts are. It's not sort of in the middle where there's sort of a canyon between the two sides of the apartment. It's not even on the side facing a sort of area where there's, even today, there's sort of a main road leading to a sort of a small stretch of land that still hasn't been developed. It's not even there. The location where Madeleine was supposedly taken is like the most exposed corner of the Ocean Club, meaning in terms of line of sight. It's the most exposed part of the entire complex. It just means that around apartment 5A, you have all of these other apartments rising above it from 1 to 3 sides, right? And so that's just right at the apartment. And now if you're attempting to walk any distance from there, the apartments rising above the roads all across your route. So how on earth and why on earth are you choosing to do this in such a exposed area, right? It's not like shoplifting where you can kind of just take something and tuck it into your pocket. If you pick up a child, it's kind of like, well, everybody can see that that's going on. And it's not only that, it's like, isn't the child going, it's not your child, isn't the child going to wake up and scream and also get attention? And the story was also that it was happened at the window and the shutter was lifted. Well, that also makes an incredible racket. So if you somehow manage not to be seen, how would you manage not to be heard? So you'd kind of imagine someone who was absolutely certain that they wanted to do this would have a vehicle nearby, because you wouldn't want to walk a very long distance in this fabric and sort of reasonably expect to not be seen. So you would imagine there'd be a vehicle nearby, and was there a vehicle nearby? Because with that road, you can also see all along the road. And so if there wasn't a vehicle, then does it really make any sense? So in summary, just to wrap up, I see we're at 90 minutes. I don't really want to go much beyond that. I'm not sure what's more disappointing. This is my personal opinion. I'm not sure what's more disappointing in the McCann case. The failure to find justice for the little girl, similar to the John Benet Ramsey case. I don't know what's more disappointing. The failure that there's been justice in this case, or the ongoing failure of the media to report facts instead of repeating what seems to be fake news. If you've read somewhere that the Portuguese are investigating the case and they seem to be investigating Christian Bruckner, I don't know whether that is factually true. It seems more accurate to say the Portuguese have been asked by the Germans to do something in order so that they can continue what they want to do. And that's a totally different story. It's a totally different story than saying, in other words, the way I understand it, the way I interpret it, there are legal protocols and things like the statute of limitations that need to be addressed. It's not like there's suddenly been this incredible revelation of evidence, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is how it's portrayed, that suddenly there's this massive breakthrough in the McCann case, and at around the 15-year anniversary, there's hope that this case can be solved at any moment. Can it? Because isn't this the exact same narrative we heard when Martin Ney was the man of the month, that year? So is the media the bad guy here? Is it really the media that's the bad guy? Isn't it the widespread failure of the public? Is the media the bad guy, or is it the widespread failure of the public or certain parts of the public to engage in critical thinking? Because it's the public that read the media. It's the public that either say, this is nonsense, or don't say this is nonsense. Bear in mind, I quoted that tweet from Colin Sutton, who was saying, let me go back to it. He read an article in the media, and then he said the following. He said, once more, somebody selectively quoting from a balanced piece of journalism, and you didn't mention the word scapegoat. And he talks about it being a distortion, right? So it's important to criticize things like that if, to your knowledge, it is not balanced, it's not complete, it's not realistic, it's not true. It's not a full, if it feels like it's misleading, whatever. Fake news, and I kind of thought about this when I was on the Wild Coast, because I was fishing. I'm not really a typical fisherman, but I was in a fisherman type scenario. And it kind of occurred to me that fake news is like a fisherman who knows just how to bait his hook. Fake news is like this expert fisherman who knows exactly where to fish, what time to fish, what bait to use, and all he wants to catch either is the biggest fish that he can catch or as many fish as he possibly can. And when I was there, I caught a galjoen, or it's also known as a black bream. And it's actually, I think, endemic to South Africa. The meat apparently tastes very, very good for a fish. And I actually thought it was a beautiful fish. It was about as long as from the point of my elbow to my hand, a little bit longer. So it was about that long. And it was a beautiful fish. I've got a photo of it. I'll maybe put it on somewhere at some point. And I kind of wanted to save it. First of all, I didn't want to eat it. And second of all, the guy that I'd paid to use his equipment and use his expertise and so on, I basically said he could have the fish, which basically meant that it's going to die. You know, it's going to be eaten or it's whatever. And then I spoke to another fisherman afterwards, and I said, you know, I offered this guy 100 Rand. It might not sound like a lot. Maybe it isn't a lot. It's about, what's 100 Rand? Is it $7 or so? How many pounds is it? About maybe 5 pounds. Basically that I will buy the fish from him, and then I was going to just like throw it into the sea. And then I thought, and then he said, no, he wants the fish. Now I'd caught the fish, so it technically was mine. I could have just said, okay, I'm just taking the fish. And then I thought of raising it to double. And then I thought, but what is the point of fishing? What is the point of fishing if not to catch a fish and either eat the fish or sell the fish or whatever? And then I left it at that. But then when I spoke to another fisherman, I said, do you think he did eat the fish? Because he was quite a sort of poor fisherman. And he said, no ways, he would have sold the fish. He would just have wanted the money for it. And then I felt quite bad. I felt like maybe I should have given him money and just set the fish free. But it made me think of the sort of callousness of trying to catch things just for money. And isn't that what fake news is doing? It's trying to catch the biggest fish or as many fish as you possibly can and to make as much money as you possibly can. And who cares about the fish? And that was my thought. What about the fish? And obviously you can make the argument, well, what about whenever you eat a hamburger? And I ate a hamburger today, but this was a case where I saw the fish, I caught the fish in a way I was responsible for the fish, and I do want to be responsible for it, right? So what about the fish? But think of it in this sense. What about the fish that are being caught, that are being hooked, right? Are some fish hooked and then they're hooked again and they're hooked again? Don't they ever learn that the easily available nourishment floating right in front of them is just too easy? Don't we learn the same thing either? That Christian Bruckner has just been made a formal suspect after 15 years. Isn't this just too easy? And if we respond and we say, I think this is a major development, haven't you been hooked? So anyway, on that note, let's have a look at the poll right now. I see no is down to, yes is at 24%, no is at 45%. I don't know is also quite high, 33, almost 32%. So it's still about a quarter of you believe that this is a significant development from almost 300 votes. Morgan Le Fay says, correct, Nick. I don't think this is unsolvable, as unsolvable as it's been made out to be. So just to wrap up, it's a question to you guys, and I'd be interested to see your responses. Shouldn't we as the true crime community learn to become not so easily fooled by the psychology of simply repeating the same thing over and over again until we're hooked? So if you think about it, Christian Bruckner's been named again and again and again over 2 years, and now he's announced a formal suspect. Does that make him a legitimate suspect? Because he's been named in the news again and again and again, does that make him a legitimate suspect? So isn't it up to us to kind of become au fait, to be educated on what these cases are going, what is going on with them, what is the backstory to them, what is the wool being pulled over our eyes, and in what way? And True Crime Rocket Science, I call it the most authentic voice. What we're trying to do is ascertain reality, not be caught up in the things that hook other people. We're trying to steer clear of the hooks and actually try and navigate without being hooked, right? And able to kind of safely swim without someone taking advantage of us, without being misled by something that is baited and seems all too easy, right? That's basically my story. I see we're at 1 hour 40 minutes. It's a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but I hope it's been concise for especially those who are watching, not the live stream, but subsequent. If you've been watching until this point, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Rad Chow, interesting avatar, but very well said. It's called discernment, certainly is. Louise Hunter says, the timing of this is all too convenient, isn't it? Pauline Buckle says, we have to be able to recognize fake news from real news as well, and we haven't yet. One thing I've sort of realized is, and I think the Johnny Depp trial really shows this, is just how biased we are, and I include myself. We are all very biased individuals. Even when we're trying our utmost to be unbiased, we are nevertheless very biased towards our own interests, and in a way it's to be expected. It's kind of like, if you think about a dog is biased towards its own species. It's friendly or unfriendly depending on whatever. But do you know what I'm saying? And if you kind of went to a dog and said, can you please be less discriminating? And I'm certainly not trying to make the argument that people should be more like dogs or anything like that. I'm simply saying, in terms of a dog, it is kind of like in its own, I feel like I'm getting myself into trouble by making this argument, but it's to its own benefit to do things for its own benefit, if that makes sense. With us, with people, society demands that we are politically correct and that we are objective and that we are not biased and that we are real and realistic. All I'm trying to say is, don't we, in a way, gravitate towards being biased? And I think our social media, if you could actually see the algorithm of all your likes and dislikes, you would see how biased you actually are. Probably you could see it more clearly if you were shown somebody else's. Someone said, this is someone's social media algorithm. This is what they say about whatever, politics, relationships, religion, the opposite sex, the same sex, whatever. You probably see, wow, there are some strong subjective feelings on that level. And I think what would become abundantly clear is that the biases we have are a lot stronger than you might think. You know what I mean? Privately, you know that some of these biases are very strong. They're not always communicated, but they are nevertheless there. And I think if you can admit that, if you can say these biases that are like hardwired into us, that are just kind of coming standard, if you can kind of acknowledge that they're there, then you can sort of begin the process of discernment and say, I'm trying to be realistic. I'm trying to be objective, but I'm probably need to try harder, a lot harder, because I'm kind of hardwired not to be realistic. I'm hardwired to be biased according to my backstory. And a great fiction, a great fictional fabric that shows how biases are wired is the excellent HBO series Westworld, where you see how these backstories cycle back and reinforce and reinforce. And in a weird way, we are a lot like that. And I would like to believe that we are more than our backstories. We are more than our biases, that we can think critically and we can almost think sometimes we can put ourselves completely aside and say, regardless whether this benefits me or not, regardless whether this benefits my position or not, is this reality? Because think about a fish in the sea that's just swimming around, it's doing what it's supposed to do, and now a baited hook lands in front of it. Now is the test. Is this fish able to discern reality? Has this fish kind of figured out that when things drop from the sky unbidden and are too good to be true, well, there's a catch. And guess what? I'm going to be the catch. I'm going to be the catch of the day if I'm not careful. And I think because people have this dominion over their lives, everything is so convenient, we I think become quite lazy in our thinking and in our thinking critically, and it can come at a cost if we're not careful. The easy way to explain that is if you're driving and you lose concentration, what that can cost you in terms of crashing into somebody else or going off the road, destroying your car or injuring yourself. That's the failure of yourself to remain mentally alert. But in the fish scenario, you don't pay attention to what you're eating. You don't pay attention to your environment. You're not reacting to your environment. And thus you kind of become a victim of the fishermen that are out there. You're not exerting, you're kind of on cruise control. You're not actually exerting conscious thought about your circumstances because you're just going with the flow. And that can get dangerous. We're living in quite a dangerous world right now with Corona, with what's happening in Ukraine, with other things happening in our environment. And cases like this, the Madeleine McCann case, are kind of like test cases to say, can you see what is happening here? That certain people understand reality, whatever it is, in this way, and certain people understand it in that way. Can you cross that bridge as well? Can you convince someone else that they are being suckered, or is it just us versus them? I'm clever and you dumb. Well, that's also not going to solve the problem. You've got to kind of find a way to, to show someone the baited hook, that they appreciate it, not that you simply imposing your bias onto them or your reality onto them. You need to show them how to see what is there, not through your eyes, but through their eyes. That's a lot harder to do. So that's my story. Susan says that's what happened to Johnny D. He was the catch of the day. Okay, let's see some of your points. Pauline Buckle says, Jim Morrison wrote, "Into this world we're thrown." Yeah, well said. Terry Dean says, "We often want to trust our first instincts and vehemently defend that instead of being open to other scenarios." It is important, like this world rewards confidence. This world rewards the extrovert who's absolutely sure of what he thinks or knows, right? And the introvert who's unsure, who second guesses, who's quietly trying to figure things out, tends to be seen as weak and uncertain. But you get certain introverts that end up being extremely successful, like Bill Gates, the thinkers. Somebody said, look at the introverts in this room. They're going to be your employers one day. Talking about folks, I guess, like Bill Gates. It's quite an interesting thing, quite an interesting way of looking at it. There's more to say on that topic, but I want to kind of wrap this conversation up. Nisi says, so much unawareness among us. Ali says, this is more relevant now than ever. It is. I must say, when I started writing about the Madeleine McCann case, other cases as well, Amanda Knox, John Benet Ramsey, Oscar Pistorius, I was very aware of what I called the counter narrative, what I called the inauthentic narrative. That was my word for it. And I was seeing it in true crime, and I thought, this is very dangerous, and it's very frightening because it's so effective. And then I saw that this counter narrative, this inauthentic narrative, was bubbling up beyond true crime. It was bubbling up in politics and in other areas, and people were starting to call things fake news. And I started to realize this fake PR and this inauthentic narrative that can take over true crime and distort it and whatever, can also take over our realities in terms of beyond true crime. And now fake news, now no one knows what to trust. Entire news agencies are regarded as fake news. I get that all the time. And so in a situation like that, it's like, well, now you can make up your own reality. Now you can go to social media and just get reinforcement for whatever reality you want. Go and find your echo chamber. And anyone you disagree with, just block them or unfollow them or unfriend them or whatever. It's quite a problem for critical thinking, is that all these echo chambers and rabbit holes that have now changed what used to be the ordinary flux and flow of people and ideas, they now get channeled into these algorithms and into these rabbit holes, and you get what I'm saying. As I say, I saw this years ago in true crime and really frightened me, and now it's with us in the real world as an everyday reality. And that's why, you can't really blame the fake news, and you can't really blame this publisher of it. What you can do is think critically, think independently, find the answers by discernment, by digging, by educating yourself. And don't take someone's word for it. Don't take my word for it. Ask a question and go and find the answer. Second guess some of those answers. Do enough reading, and when you've read a certain amount, ask yourself, is there another side to the story? And what is that side? And am I convinced by that side? Right? Okay. We had 307 votes. We still had 24% yeses. So by far, I wouldn't say by far, but the minority of you seem to know that this is not that significant, or that's how you see it. I wonder whether people beyond the true crime community, what the stats would say. Would they be similar? What do you? There's still 31% who say I don't know. That's a lot of you. That's a lot of you. I don't know is not always a bad answer, but I hope if you're saying I don't know, that you can then find out, that you go to the trouble to find out, that you go and maybe read. You can even just read the Wikipedia page or read books. Books are a really good source. Don't just read one book, read a couple. You can read Kate McCann's book, you can read my book, you can read a couple of books, and you'll soon start getting a sense of what you think about everything. And that's your informed opinion, and that's important. And the Madeleine McCann case is just practice for trying to figure out something that is kind of, it seems to be this big mystery, but it's not that mysterious when you pay attention to it. Real life is the same. It seems to be very difficult and mysterious, but once you do it, it's not that difficult. There's so many things that are like that. Driving, I don't know. Once you do it, it's frightening, but it becomes easier once you face your fears. Anyway, thank you to all of those who voted. Thank you for those who showed up for this live stream. I see there are about 160 left in chat. I think we went over 200 every now and then. I did waffle a bit here at the end. Sorry about that. I'm trying to bring us into the 2-hour mark. Thank you to the members who are here. Thank you to the mods. I know Jean Karras is here and Sky Kerrigan. Thanks, guys, for doing your thing. Here's a question from Ande Warje says, is your injury mostly healed up? I can cough quite hard now and I'm kind of okay. But it's still tender. I'm still going to take another 2 weeks before I exercise kind of the way I want to. So I might swim and just kick and walk on the treadmill for the next couple of days, but it certainly has improved. Thanks for your question. What I also think is interesting with something like a rib injury, where the doctors tell you they can't do anything, like we can't do, it's a serious injury, we can do nothing about it. Your body has got to heal on its own and you've got to give it the opportunity to do so. I think the mind can also heal, and the mind does heal, but you've got to give it the opportunity to do so. And to heal your mind, you've got to take certain things that are undermining your mind, that are a noise to your mind, and give your psychology a chance to rebalance. And only you're going to know what that is. But I'm just saying the human body is an incredible thing. Like a rib that breaks, it can actually heal itself. Even the best car can't do that. Even the most sophisticated car can't heal itself. But your mind is also something that can get damaged by the things you feed it and the things you don't feed it. And something like thinking may seem like it might be hard, it might be painful, but it's also kind of exercise that your mind needs to stay strong. Gathering Place, thanks for that. Good to see you here as well. Corporal Deb says, how is Timmy? I'm a little bit worried about Timmy. I'm hoping Timmy doesn't have biliary. It's possible that he may have picked that up. Otherwise, Timmy seems a little bit quieter than usual. I don't know if he's also tired from his trip, but he is still playing with me. He's still there. He does seem a little bit subdued, but I think he's a little bit tired from the exertions. He certainly did exert himself a lot when we were on holiday, so I think he's sort of recovering from that. Jean Karras says, Morgan Le Fay, think about joining us on Patreon. Robbie Robin, I like that word, neuroplasticity, good word. Morgan Le Fay says, I often watch replays, not often caught a live. Enjoyed you all, and thank you, Nick. We'll try and catch more lives. Terry Dean says, interesting that an age progressed Maddie was revealed in 2012. Yeah, thanks. Patricia says, I love that your cracked rib has an anniversary. Yeah. It's just part of the true crime psychology. It's an anniversary of that. We're coming up to the anniversary of the Barry Morphew case on the 9th of May, 6 days before that. the Madeleine McCann case. It's also the 15-year anniversary of the Amanda Knox case this year in late October, November this year. So that's another case to look at later on in the year. Okay, let's go through some of your last points. Gathering place is the bone has to realign and knit back together. Gathering place, when you look at the break, it's so out of kilter, that break. It's painful to look at, and you've kind of got to wonder how on earth does something that broken, how on earth does that get fixed? But I mean, I came across a guest at the hotel I was staying at who said he'd actually punctured a rib and broke several ribs, and he made a full recovery with no intervention. I must say, I really didn't know that having a punctured lung, the doctors are like, well, there's nothing we can do. We can drain the fluid, but we can't touch the rib. I would never have known that. So that certainly shifted my ignorance in that particular area. Gathering Place says, by the way, I'm happy to be traveling to California in a couple of days. That's good to hear. Terry Dean says, Maddie's 19th birthday approaching. With your wow. So that's how hard I can cough. There's a little bit of discomfort, no pain, but that was quite a hard cough. John Benet Ramsey, 25 plus 6. So John Benet would be around about 32 years old now, right? Quite interesting. Calcium build all around the bone, yeah. Ali says Amanda Knox was on British News a little while ago. I did put up a recent appearance Amanda Knox made on at a university. If you're interested, I'll just put the link up. And then I think I'm going to say au revoir. Where is it? An Evening with Amanda Knox. At Ellie, okay. If you're interested, Ellie. Geraldine says, John Benet, no, that is one bizarre case. I must say, to me, there are a lot of similarities between John Benet Ramsey and Madeleine McCann. A lot of similarities. Interesting point, Terry. Gathering Places, my airplane ticket was 3 times as costly, probably because of fuel prices. Hoppen Holly says, so is this for real this time? Hoppen Holly, I don't, well, what do you think the answer is to Hoppen Holly's question? Is this for real this time? I'd rather you guys answer it. Sleuth and Sandal says, you couldn't cough like that a few weeks ago. That's true. Great to see your recovery coming along so well. I don't think I can sneeze completely without trying to hold it back. The problem is you're only going to find out when you do that. I'd rather not do that. But yeah, definitely, I don't think about it. I'm not conscious about it. Yeah, so, but I'm also putting on weight and I'm feeling unfit. So I feel like I need to get back sooner than later. Alice says, thank you very much. I'll check that out next. Sounds good. interesting point from Patricia Burns. To me, there's quite a lot of similarity. There's, the time between when the Ramsey spoke to the authorities and the time that the McCann spoke to the authorities was almost the same. The revolving door of suspects is the same. I don't know, I just find it quite interesting. The way that the authorities had this incredible respect and sort of deferred to the expertise of these either rich people or respected people, the same. I don't know, there's just quite a lot of similarities. Stephanie's arriving just as I'm leaving. That's kind of a first. Stephanie says, I made it to say hello. We'll definitely watch the replay. Sounds good. Thanks everyone for behaving very well. Sky, thanks a lot for that. Sky, thanks a lot for your moderating as well. But thanks a lot to everyone for being well behaved in chat. Didn't have any problems, so really appreciate that. Get in Sweden. I hope you have a good sleep. It is 11 o'clock here at night. It's getting quite cold here. It's been raining all day. So I'm actually glad I'm not where I was, because to me the coast is really miserable when it's cold and rainy. I think it's 9 o'clock in the UK. So you guys must enjoy the rest of your evening, the guys in the UK and Europe. Hop and Holly says, thanks, Nick. Okay, so thanks, guys, a lot for joining me. I hope you saw that in terms of the live I did yesterday, in terms of Osolia Gall, we did find out that she wrote that note. So there was some question, was it the handyman who wrote the note, or was it her that wrote the note? I understood that she wrote the note, but we did confirm that it was Osolia who wrote that note about need a new handyman. I just want to see what Stephanie says. Made it to the semi-finals. Wow, that's really good. So Stephanie's son made it to the semi-finals of the World Championship. So effectively like third place, is that right? Patricia says it's 10 here, okay. Okie dokie says, as far as the timing, of course police withhold information. Of course they would wait and collect as much evidence as possible before the 15-year mark. He is in prison. What threat is he? Okay, so we can wait maybe another 15 years before whatever. Mel Stiller says, thanks. Terry says, Nick, when's the next live so I know whether or not to go to work? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be doing a live tomorrow. Nothing comes to mind, to be honest. Like, there's nothing comes to mind that I want to talk about. But we'll see. Gathering Places, thanks for your time and effort. Stephanie, sorry to kind of love and leave you, but you did arrive late. I'm already 8 minutes past my sort of self-imposed deadline of 2 hours. So I don't want to take it too much further than this. Wow, Sharon Lynn's now also joining us. Stephanie says it's okay. I'm just wondering, is there something else we can talk about true crime wise? I just want to have a look at some of the posts that I put up. Have you guys seen the video, the top 15 most shocking moments from Johnny Depp's testimony? Have you guys seen that? The thing is, I don't know if I really want to talk about that. You need to kind of see the video to talk about it, to do that in a good way. Alec Baldwin, Barry Morphew search efforts. Well, I don't know if there's any news on that. Let me check quickly. There's no news on Suzanne Morphew. Nothing about Suzanne Morphew's search right now, which is a little bit concerning, isn't it? Gabby Petito, must say there's so many Google alerts that come up with Gabby Petito and then they've got nothing to do with her. Yeah, no, there's not really. Letitia Stork, trials delayed again. I think because her mental health evaluation was delayed. So that just also seems to be in endless limbo. Yeah, I feel like I've really covered everything for now. Summer Wells. Sharon Lynn, that's very kind of you, especially since you've Casey Anthony, nothing there either. Thanks a lot, Sharon. What is REKT? What does that mean? Wrecked. Oh, is it wrecked meaning wrecked? Okay. Don't laugh, but when I was on the Wild Coast, I sat on like a chair that was, I guess, where a woman would sit and do her makeup. It was sort of, there was like a mirror in front of it. And I sat on this chair. It kind of felt like a piano chair. It sort of had a soft cushion and it was sort of, didn't have a backrest. And it kind of crumbled under me. It was sort of made of chipboard, and the chair basically, yeah, had a vanity. It kind of crumbled under me, and yeah, I felt quite bad. I felt like, wow, am I that heavy? But I've got to say the chair really wasn't made very well. So, but your little animation, Sharon, brought that back definitely. Timmy's actually sitting at my feet. I wonder whether I can get him to make an appearance. Timmy, come boy. Timmy, I can't keep my audience interested. I need you. Timmy, come boy, come. Timmy. He's at my feet like sleeping. Timmy, come. Hey, come. He totally doesn't want to get up. Timmy, come boy. Come, up. Come boy. I can see his little face down here. Timmy, come. Timmy, come boy. Go for a walk. Do you want to go for a walk here? See, now I am using fake news to manipulate my dog. That's terrible. That is really terrible. Timmy, come boy. See if I can get him. He just does not want to get up. Timmy, you must stop being so lazy. Come. Okay, Timmy. Well, I've been a very horrible owner. Timmy, you must try not to be so lazy. Okay, so here is Timmy. He's been, I'm wearing like slippers. They're sort of quite woolly, and so he's been comfortable sort of lying on them or next to them. So, yeah. Timmy, I really needed you to keep the show on the road. Are you awake? Huh? Well, I must say, it feels very warm. He was obviously very snug down there. There's a beautiful dog. He actually needs a bath, and he also needs some grooming. I don't know if you can see the left side of his moustache has been cut because he just got so many thorns in it. So his moustache looks a bit funny. Yeah. Nancy Christensen says, I've been enjoying going into your channel and watching older cases, John Bonet, etc. Thanks for that. Oh, and here's Ivy. Ivy's just walking under me. I don't know if I can pick her up. Come, Ivy. Ivy, come. Come on. Cats don't tend to... anyway, there she's gone out the door. Maybe I can show it to you, just her tail. Ivy, come. Ivy, come. Oh, yes, she is. There's Ivy. Ivy. Okay. Okay, guys, that's it. That's all, folks. Thanks a lot for joining me tonight, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. I don't know if I'll see you guys tomorrow, but if I do, just watch the space. Marge, thanks for making it. I'm sorry that we connected so briefly, but yeah, thanks for making it anyway. Guys, take care, and I'll see you next time.